for the final steps of your New York beauty. We did our little quilt show, we learned how to paper piece our beautiful arches, and now we're going to cut out the background and the quarter circles that are used on the inside of the arch, and I'm going to show you how to do some curved piecing. So this is our template. So I'm going to use freezer paper. You know how much I love freezer paper. It's the dull side on one side, a little bit waxy on the other. Good freezer paper you can use for 8 to 10 times. So I drew these out of freezer paper, adding that 1/8 of an inch all the way around all of the perimeter edges. I took this and I ironed it onto my quarter circle. This one is onto my arch. And I want to just show you ironing it onto this big beautiful piece that I'm going to use for my background. You want to, whenever possible, line it up with the straight of the grain of the fabric. You don't want the outside edges of your block to be on the bias edge. Well, sometimes you do. So if I were going to take this one, I'm going to peel this one off. And let's say that I wanted this so that this lady, you see how fabulous she is here? If I wanted her to be standing in the center of my New York Beauty block, these edges, which would be the outside edges of my New York Beauty block, they would be on the bias. That could be very bad. So to make it not so bad, what you want to do is spray size your fabric. So the entire thing, maybe even more than you normally would. You don't want those bias edges, but if they are going to be biased, if you've done a little spray sizing on them, you should be okay. So now I'm going to take this, I'm going to line this one up with the straight of the grain of the fabric. I'm going to press it down. Sticks really, really well when I've got my really hot iron. I'm going to take this one, iron him back down again. Now cut them out. So it's really pretty standard how you'd imagine to cut them out. But just like with the arch, when it comes to the straight lines, you want to use a straight ruler. And for the curves, just cut along the curve. Again, if you're more comfortable with it, you can use a pair of scissors to cut out that curve. That's okay. After a while though, what you'll start doing is stacking up multiple fabrics and maybe cutting out 2 or 3 at a time. So pick out all the fabrics that you want for all your different ones that you're working on and cut out 2 or 3 at a time. On this one, because this is a square, I'm going to use my square ruler. There we go. Then I know that that edge is square. Now for my big piece, again, let's get these out of the way so I don't accidentally cut them. Use my square ruler, line it up on square. And I'm going to do that for those edges too. So if I line it up, this should measure about 10 3/4 at this point. And then do my center curve. This piece is such a nice big piece. I usually save this and use this for one of the other blocks, the quarter circle on the inside. There. So here's our pieces. Black and white pin dot. When in doubt, use a black and white pin dot. Makes everything better. There's this, and then that. Now that's going to be a cool block. Next time we're going to actually piece these curves. So here's our 4 pieces, and these are the curves that we need to piece. It's usually more difficult to piece smaller curves, so I recommend you start piecing with the largest curve. Just get yourself comfortable, start with the easiest one. We need to first find the center of that arch. So fold it in half and make a little nip of the fabric. That little nip is going to line up with the point on that arch. My recommendation is that you always piece with the concave on top. So the concave makes the C. So I like to piece with that C piece on the top. So if we're looking here, this makes the C. So I'm going to flip that over and I'm going to piece with this on top. So first I need to match up the center. So there's the little nip and there's the little point on my arch. I want to line those up and put a pin in. Then come around to the edge. Here I want to line up the straight line of the straight edge of the block and put a pin in it. Then come to the other side and do the same thing. Oops. Now we go to the sewing machine. So at the sewing machine, I've put my stitch length back to normal, but I have moved my needle over, so now I'm a scant 1/4 inch using my seam guide right here. So this will be sewed with a scant 1/4 inch. Start here. Take my pin out. Now this is where you're going to set up that curve. So you see how I can, because it's the C portion, the concave, I can push it up and back and forth and I can see what's below. I'm just going to line it up till it all lines up. There, all lined up. And then just sew. You can stop, keep moving that concave section so it lines up with the piece below, which is called the convex section. That was a little bit of 8th grade just coming back to me right there. Concave, convex. It's the only part of 8th grade I want to remember. Okay, now we're going to line this guy up. All right, now I'm going to leave him there and come and get my other pieces. So now these two need to go together and I'm going to do this arch. So first I need to fold him in half. And fold him in half so that I have a center. Now match up those little notches. So I notched the top one for the next curve that we'll be doing in this notch. So I usually start with my center, come to my outside edges. And go to my sewing machine. All right, at my sewing machine, this time I've gotten my awl. This is my clover awl. I love the handle. I love this little part here, this little rubber part, so my hands don't slip down to the edge. And it's got a very, very sharp point. That's going to be my extra finger so that I can help ease on these smaller curves. So just like before, we're going to start at the beginning and take out that first pin. Now line up that arch, but the arch is much tighter now. So use your awl to help line it up and hold it in place as you go around. Here's my next half. Again, just kind of bring that concave section out to match up with the convex section that's underneath. So now my outside curve and inside curve are done. And I want to try to press to the point of least resistance. So on this block from the back side, the point of least resistance is for these points to go out. You're not always going to be able to do that, and that'll make sense when you make different designs, but whenever possible, try to press it so it goes out. Looks good. And then this one, I'm going to press this so that this goes down into the quarter circle. Again, you're not always going to be able to do it that way. Sometimes you'll want to flip them back and forth if the New York Beauties are going to be pieced right together so that you have your seams butting from one side to the next. All right, last but not least is to piece this. Now I marked the center of that, but I did not mark the center of my arch. So I need to fold that. Nip. Piecing with the concave on top. I'm going to flip this big one over on top. Match the center first. Come to the straight edge. And the other side. And go to my sewing machine. Right before, I'm going to use my awl to help keep things lined up. Block is pieced. I want to give it one final pressing. So this seam that I just sewed to the point of least resistance means that it comes down. So I'm going to press that toward the quarter circle. All right, that's yummy. But before I trim it, I'm going to give it a final spray size. I want to be sure that everything stays exactly where I wanted it to stay. I'm kind of particular about that. My block is done, but it's not been trimmed yet. Remember at the very beginning we had that design and I showed you how to add the 1/8 of an inch all the way around the outside perimeter of the block. That is so that you can now trim this block to be perfectly square. This design should measure 10 and a half right now. If I use my, I'm using my, let me put this out of the way, using my OmniGrid ruler, and I've added the glow tape to the bottom of my ruler, so it is showing me the measurement of 10 and a half inches, and I've got it lined up so that the 1/1 of the ruler is in my top right-hand corner. I'm going to put my block down and see what size it actually measures. So if I put this all the way up to the corner, it measures here, from here to here. This is just 10 and a half inches, but I added that 1/8 of an inch around. How can that happen? I don't know. More importantly, I don't care. I added that 1/8 of an inch on purpose so that I would be able to square this up, and I'm going to have plenty to square up there. So in the squaring up process, you want to start with the 1/1 in the top corner, and there's a couple of marks that you want to pay close attention to, and those are these points. Maybe I'll move the ruler. These points, this point and this point, need to be 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the block. So actually, let's flip it around this way so you'll be able to see it this way. So when I line this up, I am making sure that that point is 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the block, or the edge of the ruler, and this one here also 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And then I want to be sure that I'm still using, I want to be sure that I've got 10 and a half inches here of my background. All right, that looks good. I'm a little bit over 1/4 of an inch. I'm always willing to go bigger than 1/4 of an inch, just never smaller. And here at 1/4 of an inch. carefully trim the right and the top. I'll spin him around. Now I'm going to tuck it right into the 10.5 using that glow tape on my ruler. It's right there, lining up perfectly at 10.5. And there you go. So using that little trick by adding the 1/8 inch all the way around, that means that all of my blocks are going to be perfect 10.5 inch squares. I've got about maybe a dozen of them made at this point. I think I want to make 6 or 8 more, so I have a nice big quilt. At some point in time, I promise, I will show you the quilting of this quilt. I hope you enjoyed the New York Beauty process. I hope that you also like our channel, share it with your friends. Please tell everybody you know about Quilting with Nancy. Have a great day.